Disney have decided to stop being the groomers that they've been for the last several years and are changing their stance on the type of entertainment and content that they want to put in front of your children. I think this is about time. Here talking to me about that is my good friend Aaron Sparrow.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's definitely a shift from the path that they've been going down for the last several years, the path to non-profitability. And I think that's basically what it all goes back to. Is it just stems back to the fact that they're like, look, we can't really afford to spend any more money on these agenda-driven kind of projects that we're putting out. We need to kind of go back to family-friendly entertainment. We need people to feel safe putting their kids in front of our shows, in front of our product, and consuming it. So what do we do? So it seems to be that's the pivot that they're making now.
I see a lot of people trying to blame this or say Trump is the reason that this is happening. And I think the election certainly is part of that, but I think the reason that they're reacting isn't so much that there's a new president-elect that's about to come into office early next year. I think it's they realized the sea change as far as the way people felt in general, moving back to the center. They're like, holy crap, we just missed the sea change within culture itself, and we need to start catching up.
Well, I mean, I don't think there ever was a sea change. I think they were basically like looking at Twitter in its highly edited form.
AstroTurfing it, yeah.
And then basically we're like, oh, that's the direction that everything's going, and there's money to be made there. And they were convinced by, BlackRock and, with the ESG and the DEI that this is the wave, this is the future, this is the modern audience, people are going to flock to this. And they kind of, used some examples of that. They were like, you made a Black Panther movie and it made all this money. And it's like, yeah, but it was also connected to the MCU and every project was making money. And yeah, there was a great response to Black Panther, but it didn't really, have anything to do with all of this agenda that was being pushed. It had to do with the momentum of the Marvel Universe. It had to do with the fact that Black Panther has always been a good, solid character. He's always been beloved by comic book fans, and that he was given a good a good launching pad in Civil War that made him interesting and made him like a very moral and interesting character. So, you drew a lot of people in, and they thought, well, if we take that and we apply that to every single marginalized or minority group that's out there, and we elevate them into these big projects, these video game projects, these movie projects, then there'll be this groundswell of support. But the problem is when you're appealing to a niche audience, as we say, you have to spend a niche budget in order to make money. And so they were dumping way too much money into these projects for these niche audiences, and there's no profit to be made.
Pixar's original animated series, Win or Lose, will no longer include a transgender storyline in a later episode. The Hollywood Reporter has learned the series follows a co-ed middle school softball team named the Pickles. In the week leading up to their championship game, each of the 8 episodes centers on the off-the-field life of a character and their point of view. Whether it be a player, parent, a coach, or an umpire, the character remains in the show, but a few lines of dialogue that reference gender identity are being removed. A source close to Win or Lose said the studio made the decision to alter course several months ago. And it does feel like Disney are trying to get back on course, realizing that they'd gone so far afield and alienated their primary audience, the American family, to such a degree that they could no longer keep going on this trajectory. And I certainly applaud the effort and realize that they made a mistake, and it's time to start getting back to family wholesome entertainment.
Yeah, it's, they realize that they've made a huge financial error. They've turned off a huge portion of their audience. They've driven them away, and it was affecting their projects. So this is a sound financial decision. I saw, some people complaining online. I saw one guy in particular who was like, this is the only thing that interested me about this show. And I was like, really? That's the one thing that interested you? So, and then he's like, I'm not gonna watch it, and I suggest everybody boycott it. And so it was just like, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, so they lost you, who was only interested in this one episode. They lost a customer. Oh my gosh, do you think they'll be able to find another one? Do you think that appealing to the huge range of families that are out there like Disney used to, do you think that they'll be able to survive just doing that instead of appealing to you, an audience of one? And all these people talking about boycotts, it's like, look, mainstream entertainment, when you're spending mainstream dollars and mainstream amounts of money to do mainstream entertainment, it has to appeal to the broadest range of people possible. And you turn people off with these niche little, like trying to appeal to these niche little audiences. Obviously, you weren't going to watch the whole series. You weren't going to support it. You were only interested in that one thing. And then calling for a boycott, look, don't watch it if you don't want to. Go do your boycott. It'll be just as effective as when your audience, the modern audience, tried to boycott Hogwarts Legacy. You guys have no strength. You guys have no numbers. You don't affect anything with your boycotts because you are such a small amount of people. So what Disney is doing quite sensibly is pivoting back towards the most money possible. That's what companies have to do. I don't need companies coming in and signing their name onto political manifestos. I don't need them being activist companies. There's a very pervasive argument on the internet, which is just shut up, brand. You are trying to sell me something. Don't think that puts you in a position to lecture me about anything.
Well, and certainly with what Disney was doing, you think about Disney and Disney movies and most of Disney's projects that say Disney or Pixar on them, they're aimed at little kids. It certainly alienated people with Strange World or whatever it was. Certainly alienated people with, Buzz Lightyear, the spinoff from obviously Toy Story. You're like, wait, I want to watch this with my kid, but now there's going to be a lesbian kiss and that's a main part of the storyline. Why is this being forced into Disney? And it never fit with kids' products at all.
Well, you had that video come out with the lady saying like, my not so secret gay agenda. I just started inserting queerness everywhere I could. And it was like, okay, so then you're making entertainment for that audience, and the shippers on Reddit and, the people like that, the adult, Arrested Development children that want to watch children's programming and see it all sexualized. That's who you're appealing to. That's a very small audience. You're not going to be able to, have profitability that way. So yeah, it's just really interesting to see all these things. Now, when you talk about Lightyear, I think the lesbian kiss is the least of that movie's problems. The biggest problem was no Tim Allen. Trying to make Interstellar and then after the fact saying, this is the movie that Andy watched that made him interested in Buzz Lightyear. No. Number one, that movie never would have come out in the 90s to interest Andy. And number two, no kid watching that would have been interested in it. He wouldn't have wanted a Buzz Lightyear. He would have wanted socks, if anything. He would have wanted the cat robot. But otherwise, no interest whatsoever. Just like you saw no interest from kids who actually saw the movie. That, those toys did not sell. That merch did not sell. Whereas if you go back to Toy Story, Buzz Lightyear was the number one toy that year, I believe.
A spokesperson for Disney confirmed that the story arc was removed and provided the following statement to the Hollywood Reporter. When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline. Disney declined to comment any further on details. That is the most sensible thing that's come out of Disney in probably 5 years now. It makes all the sense in the world.
Makes all the sense in the world. And I think that they realized, like I said, Hogwarts Legacy was a watershed moment. It's the moment when you realize that these lobbies have no power. They have no ability to affect your bottom line. So you can just issue a statement like that and say, look, we just took this out, and then not talk about it ever again. And, people on Twitter or on Reddit or whatever, they'll rage for a little while and then they'll move on to something else. But, the fact of the matter is they can't affect your bottom line. They just don't have the numbers. So just ignore them.
And you were kind of wondering at one point, it's like, how many kids' properties need to be destroyed by this? Not only, obviously, we saw with the number of Disney properties out there, but think about just like Scooby-Doo. Like, who thought of that Thelma idea? Almost made an entire franchise that lots of people have loved for years and years and years, almost toxic to the touch, just by making some really pointed changes, obviously by design, to get the message out there, and it ends up destroying entire brands whole cloth.
Well, yeah, and you hand it to Mindy Kaling, and she comes in with like a very narcissistic kind of attitude of like, I need Velma to be me. And so she recasts Velma as herself, and it's like, yeah, but you're not that likable. And people liked Velma. And then you change all of Scooby-Doo, and it's like you do a less effective parody of Scooby-Doo than Venture Brothers did. And Venture Brothers is where it should happen, just a small bit within a larger show. You don't build an entire show around mocking, this IP that for you as a company has been evergreen. The fact that they ever greenlit that is unbelievable to me. They canceled like Scoob 2 or whatever that probably would have made some money so that they could do Velma. That's what you gave us instead. Good job. Warner Brothers, I've heard it said repeatedly, and I think that it's true. Warner Brothers is the dumbest entertainment company on the planet. And the only reason that they have that title is because Lucasfilm is part of Disney, which is a larger company. But otherwise, Warner Brothers is the stupidest company on the planet.
And then you see some of the other franchises out there. They basically have broken He-Man. And they kept doing this over and over again. So it's nice to see a little bit of common sense finally entering back into entertainment. And you don't have to worry so much about, hey, is this even appropriate for my children, even though it's rated G? Gender identity has become a charged and divisive topic across the United States, especially around youth and sports. Most recently, Disney Channel's animated series Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur made headlines after some who worked on the show took to social media to say Disney banned the release of an episode focused on a recurring transgender character. The company denied that the episode was banned and said the decision to hold on releasing the episode was made more than a year ago and was not because of the transgender character's inclusion. You do have to wonder, why did they think that was ever appropriate for Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur to begin with? That's literally a show made for 6-year-old girls.
Well, you hire activists, and it's like that's the one thing that they care about. They don't care about telling a good story. They don't care about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. They don't care about any of these things. They look at everything as a vehicle for injecting their politics into. And, when you hire those people, you can't be surprised that that's what you get. And then you can't be surprised that they go out and they talk shit after the fact, about how you didn't let them do all the things that they wanted to do, because they never cared about the property. They don't care about your company. They don't care about producing something that's going to make money, because it doesn't affect them. If Disney makes $1 billion on something, they don't make another dime. So they don't, there's no incentive for them to care. What they actually care about is they care about the message. And the audience doesn't care about the message. The audience wants to be entertained. So what you have is you have a loggerhead of what the people who you've hired to produce this content want to make and what your customers want to consume. And until you get rid of the activists and you bring back people who want to entertain and want to tell stories and want to actually build something, build their career, build a property that, for a company that people can be proud of and people can be invested in. And then hopefully they get some money and they get, bigger budgets and they move on to bigger things. Until you get those people with that ambition, you're never gonna pull yourself out of this nosedive. And it seems like Disney is desperately trying to pull themselves out of that nosedive.
And I do think they've had some success. Obviously they had Deadpool and Wolverine, which was a cameo fest, but the biggest Marvel Studios film since, I think, Spider-Man No Way Home. They had Inside Out 2, which absolutely blew up. I think they've had a couple other successes with Moana 2 that don't have a lot of that stuff that was tainting the brand before. It almost does feel like Disney, as long as they stay on this path, they're probably going to be able to get most of their audience back, especially for their family, all ages stuff.
I don't know if they'll get most of their audience back, but they'll get a decent chunk of it back. And that should be enough at this point. Stop spending so much money on these movies. Get your budgets under control, and realize that you're never going to get some people back. You've alienated them to too much of an extent. Like Star Wars, never going to be a big franchise again. At least probably not in our lifetime. But you can actually turn a profit with these things. I know Moana 2 is not going to do nearly as well as they were hoping. They were hoping it was going to cross $1 billion. Doesn't look like it's going to come anywhere near that. But the goodwill of the first film put people's butts in theaters. The goodwill of towards Inside Out put people's butts in theaters. And thank goodness for Disney's sake and for the shareholders' sake and for the sake of the people working at Pixar, that they forced Pixar to take out the whole Riley's a lesbian subplot or Riley's non-binary or whatever thing that they were going to push in there. Thank goodness they took that out and just did more of a traditional coming of age story with her, because it paid dividends. You have to have broad range appeal. And when you start getting into the niche, nonsense of identity politics and gender identity politics, you lose people, you lose audience, and you lose a substantial chunk of them. So again, you're spending a lot of money on these things. You got to aim for the broadest range of people possible.
Disney is far from alone in grappling with potential fallout from politically charged content. All of Hollywood is bracing for what could be a tumultuous 4 years under the Trump administration. President-elect Donald Trump, who won in the sweeping victory last month, routinely criticized diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It has been widely reported that a number of businesses have started to pull back on DEI programming, a trend that underrepresented groups feel will only continue. Top media execs have already met with Trump, including Apple's Tim Cook, while Netflix's Ted Sarandos is scheduled to meet with him at Mar-a-Lago today. And it does feel like Hollywood's kind of waking up to the fact that they thought the culture was moving somewhere, and they went somewhere where it wasn't going. It's time to kind of pull back and make amends and maybe make nice with people that you don't politically agree with, because people are not following Hollywood's trend on this one. And they definitely pull back in a big time way, and they lost a lot of money for it.
Yeah, no, we definitely lost Hollywood as, trendsetters. if they even have been in, as time has marched on, Hollywood has become less and less important. Obviously, there's so many forms of alternative media out there now. You've got YouTube, and you've got YouTube creators out there, and a lot of people are flocking over and watching that. YouTube is doing way better than any of these streaming services. It's doing better than any of the the mainline entertainment that's on television. You've got like different kinds of voices out there, and you've got people flocking to that. So Hollywood, it just takes them too long. It's such a big, unwieldy ship. It takes them so long to turn it that they went so far to the far left, and turns out the country wasn't there. It was only Twitter, when Twitter was heavily gate kept, that it looked like the culture was headed that direction. So they bet on the wrong horse.
It does seem like a lot of people are very upset that the president-elect Trump is being treated like the president-elect, and a lot of people want to talk to him and get his ideas on where the country should be going or where he wants to take the country. And I think they're not quite ready to deal with the fact that he did, in fact, win, and he is going to be the president for 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's and just the panic that you're seeing. It's like, it's not like he hasn't already been president for 4 years, so we kind of know what we kind of know what to expect. I don't think it will be that much different than it was before. It'll take longer to get the economy under control because such radical damage has been done to it. But I'm hoping for the best. I hope for the best with every president that comes in. It's like, I want the country to succeed. So I always root for the United States to do well, no matter who is in charge. But we'll see how it goes.
And we will see how it goes for Disney trying to right the ship, and certainly other entertainment entities out there trying to get back on course. They decided to go down the DEI pathway, and it ended up not working out for them. If you appreciate what Aaron and I are doing here on the Geek Fix podcast, exclusive on Think Critical Patreon, and you would like the entire podcast, because we're going to go for another 2 hours or so, you do need to go over to Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. You can get the entire Geek Fix podcast with Aaron and I having lots of fun talking about all the toy news, wrestling, all that good stuff.